It was a typical day, or so it seemed, until something extraordinary happened that no one could have predicted. The boy, just 16, and his mom had been traveling for hours, exhausted from a long road trip. They decided to stop at a small, run-down motel just off the highway to get some rest for the night. Little did they know, this seemingly ordinary stop would lead them into a series of events that would change their lives forever. After they checked in, the mother and son settled into their room, unaware of the unexpected twist waiting to unfold. Meanwhile, across the motel, a maid was finishing up her shift. She had grown used to the routine of cleaning rooms, but today, something felt off. As she entered the room next to where the boy and his mom had stayed, she noticed a strange chill in the air. It wasn't just the usual quiet of the motel, it was as if something wasn't quite right. She brushed it off at first, focusing on her work, but the unease grew. She couldn't ignore the feeling gnawing at her. She continued with her duties, but her mind kept drifting back to that room. The boy and his mom had left earlier, their car disappearing down the road, but something had been left behind in that room, something the maid didn't expect. As she went to change the sheets, she noticed an odd bulge under the covers. Her curiosity piqued, she gently pulled back the sheets, only to uncover something that sent a shiver down her spine. But what she found didn't just startle her, it made her question everything she thought she knew. Back on the bus, hours later, a completely different scene was unfolding. A young black teen, who had just gotten on, noticed a pregnant white woman struggling to stand. Without hesitation, he stood up and offered her his seat. She smiled, grateful for the kind gesture, but little did he know that this small act of kindness would set off a chain of events that would alter both their lives in ways no one could foresee. As she sat down, she slipped a piece of paper into his hand. He thought it was just a thank you note at first, but when he opened it, his eyes widened in disbelief. What was on that paper? What did the maid find hidden under those sheets? And what was so life-changing about the note the pregnant woman gave to the teen? Stay tuned as we dive deeper into this heart-stopping, mind-bending story that will leave you questioning everything. The answers lie just beyond the next part of the story, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. The boy, Marcus, had always been a quiet kid, the type who would rather stay to himself than engage in conversations with strangers. He wasn't used to making eye contact with people, especially those who looked so different from him. He'd been raised in a small, predominantly black neighborhood, where life was tough but manageable. His mom, Laura, worked long hours at a diner to make ends meet, and she did everything she could to give him a better life. Despite their struggles, they were close, and that's why Marcus always tried to be the man of the house when his mom was away working. He'd had to grow up fast. It wasn't the first time they'd taken a road trip, but this one felt different. It had been a while since they'd been on the road together, just the two of them. There was something about it that made Marcus feel nostalgic for the time before things had gotten so hard for his mom. As the miles passed by and the sun began to set, he felt a strange sense of calm. It wasn't long before they came across the motel. It looked shabby, with flickering lights and an old sign hanging crookedly above the entrance. But after a long day of driving, it didn't matter. It was a place to rest, and that was all they needed. The room they checked into was exactly what they expected, basic and worn down. The bedsheets had seen better days, the carpet was stained, and the smell of stale air filled the room. But for Marcus and his mom, it didn't matter. They were both exhausted, and the motel was a much-needed stop. As his mom unpacked their things, Marcus sat on the bed, staring out the window at the quiet parking lot. It felt oddly empty for a Saturday night, and a part of him couldn't shake the sense that something wasn't right. But his mom seemed too tired to notice, so he pushed it aside. Across the hall, the maid, Teresa, was wrapping up her shift. She'd been working at the motel for years, and she'd seen it all. From the drunk tourists to the suspicious-looking characters who checked in late at night, nothing really surprised her anymore. But as she walked past the room where Marcus and Laura were staying, something caught her eye. The door was slightly ajar, and she saw the boy and his mother leave in a hurry. Teresa had always been observant, and something about the way they hurried out seemed odd. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but there was an energy in the air that made her feel uneasy. Shaking off the feeling, Teresa entered the room to begin her cleaning. The first thing she noticed was the silence. The room was too quiet, almost as if it was holding its breath. Teresa had been cleaning rooms in this motel for years, and she had a routine: make the bed, vacuum the carpet, wipe down the surfaces. It was all mindless work. But that day, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The air seemed thick, like the room was waiting for something to happen. As she started making the bed, her eyes were drawn to the sheets. There was a small, almost imperceptible bulge under them, right near the center of the bed. Teresa's heart skipped a beat. She reached out cautiously and pulled back the covers, revealing a strange, almost haunting sight. There, beneath the sheets, was a bundle of something wrapped tightly in cloth. It didn't look like a pillow or any part of the furniture. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up as she reached for it, her fingers trembling slightly. She was about to move it when a noise from the hallway made her freeze. A deep breath escaped her lips as she quickly pushed the sheets back into place. But her mind wouldn't stop racing. What had she just seen? It felt like she had walked in on something that wasn't meant to be seen, but she couldn't figure out what. Still, there was an unsettling pull to investigate further. For a moment, she considered calling the front desk, but then the thought of getting involved felt risky. It was probably nothing, she told herself. She had a job to finish, and it wasn't her place to get involved in the strange happenings of this motel. But she couldn't ignore the feeling, the nagging thought that something in that room wasn't quite right. Meanwhile, Marcus and his mom had made their way to the bus station. They had only planned on staying at the motel for a quick rest, but after a quick conversation, they decided it would be better to head toward the city and find a better place to stay. It was then that Marcus noticed the pregnant woman on the bus. She was struggling to find a seat, and for a moment, Marcus thought about just looking away, pretending he hadn't seen her. But something made him stand up. He wasn't sure why. Maybe it was the way she looked so tired, or maybe it was just the way he was raised. His mom had always told him that kindness mattered. Without hesitation, he moved to give her his seat. She looked up at him in surprise, then smiled gratefully. "Thank you," she said softly. "I really appreciate it." Marcus gave her a small nod, his eyes meeting hers for just a moment before he sat down on the edge of the seat. The bus lurched forward, and the two sat in silence, the sound of the engine humming in the background. As the woman settled into the seat, Marcus couldn't help but notice the way her eyes kept flicking to the window. She seemed distant, like she was lost in her own thoughts. After a few minutes, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small piece of paper. Marcus watched her out of the corner of his eye, but didn't think much of it at first. But when she slipped the paper into his hand as she stood up to leave, his heart raced. "It's for you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Just trust me." As she disappeared out the door, Marcus sat there, holding the crumpled note in his hand. He stared at it for a moment, feeling a strange sensation in his chest. What could it possibly be? His fingers trembled as he slowly unfolded the paper. What was it that this woman wanted him to know? And why had she chosen him? He didn't know, but something told him that his life was about to change. Marcus sat there, staring at the crumpled note in his hand. His heart raced, his mind spinning with questions. What could this woman possibly want from him? And why did she seem so insistent that he read the note? He unfolded the paper slowly, his hands trembling ever so slightly. The note was short, its message scrawled in messy handwriting that looked rushed, as if it had been written in haste. "Don't trust anyone. They know who you are. The truth will change everything. You'll see." The words seemed to hang in the air, the weight of them sinking into Marcus's chest. His head swam with confusion, but something deep inside him stirred, as though the note had sparked something in him he hadn't known was there. Who was she? What truth was she talking about? The whole encounter felt surreal, like a scene from a movie, but the sinking feeling in his gut told him this was no coincidence. He glanced at the note again, but before he could process it any further, the bus jolted to a stop, and the woman's words lingered in his mind like an echo. As she left, he'd noticed her eyes, wide and fearful, as if she was running from something or someone. The unsettling thought of her fear made Marcus' heart beat faster. He didn't know it yet, but he was caught in something much larger than he realized. Meanwhile, Teresa's curiosity had only deepened. She couldn't stop thinking about what she'd found under the sheets in that room. Every time she tried to push it out of her mind, the image of the strange bundle under the covers crept back in. What had it been? A bag? A bundle of clothes? Or something more sinister? She found herself standing at the motel's front desk, speaking in hushed tones to the night manager, trying to sound casual as she asked if the guests in room 14 had checked out. His answer was quick, almost dismissive. Yeah, they left an hour ago. You don't need to worry about them. But Teresa couldn't shake the feeling. Something wasn't right. She had to know what was in that room. The note the woman had given Marcus buzzed through her mind as well. Was there some kind of connection between the two? What was the woman trying to warn him about? Teresa found herself standing outside the room again, her pulse quickening as she looked at the door. She had cleaned countless rooms in this place, but she had never felt so unsettled by one before. She reached out, her hand trembling slightly as she touched the doorknob. What would she find if she went in? She didn't know, but there was something deep down telling her that it was the only way to get answers. She pushed the door open. The room was empty now, but as Teresa stepped inside, she noticed something odd. The bed had been remade, but the sheets were still rumpled, and there was an unusual stain near the edge of the mattress. Her breath caught in her throat as she bent closer to examine it. It was a dark red, almost black. Blood. But why? Her pulse quickened as she ran her fingers along the fabric, but before she could think much further, the sudden sound of footsteps outside startled her. She froze. Her heart pounded in her ears, and for a moment, she thought she might get caught. But she pulled herself together, closing the door softly behind her, and made her way back to the front desk. She had to find out more about the guests who had stayed there, about what had happened in that room. Something told her that this was all connected. But how? She couldn't answer that yet. All she knew was that her instincts were telling her to dig deeper. Back on the bus, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that the world had shifted in some subtle but unmistakable way. The note, the woman's strange behavior, the sense that something was about to change, he couldn't put it into words, but he felt like he had stepped into a story he wasn't ready for. He crumpled the note and shoved it into his pocket, trying to ignore the constant questions that were running through his mind. The woman's words haunted him. They know who you are. Who was she talking about? Who was after him? His mind raced with possibilities, but he didn't know where to start. He glanced out the window at the passing city lights, trying to focus on the present moment. The bus was quiet now, and he could hear the low hum of the engine as it made its way through the streets. But the quiet only made the tension in his chest more pronounced. What was he supposed to do with this information? He didn't have answers, but he knew one thing: he couldn't let this go. It wasn't just about the note anymore. It was about the feeling he had in the pit of his stomach, the gnawing certainty that something was coming. The silence on the bus felt like a pause before a storm. A few blocks away, Marcus's mom, Laura, was pacing back and forth outside a small convenience store. She'd been trying to call him for the last half hour, but his phone was going straight to voicemail. She hadn't meant to let him out of her sight for long, but after the long drive, she needed a moment to herself, just to breathe. But as she stood there, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She remembered the strange look Marcus had given her before they left the motel. The way his eyes had darted around the parking lot, like he was looking for something or someone. And now, he wasn't answering his phone. "Where are you, Marcus?" she muttered to herself, her worry escalating with each passing minute. Just then, her phone buzzed. It was a message from him. "Mom, I need to talk to you. Meet me at the bus station. Something's happening." Laura's heart skipped a beat. What was going on? Why was he so shaken? She had a feeling that the answers were just around the corner, but they might not be the answers she wanted to hear. The tension was building now, and all of them, Marcus, Laura, and Teresa, were on the cusp of something huge. They just didn't know it yet. They were about to uncover the tangled web of secrets that had been waiting to be unraveled. But for now, all they could do was wait and wonder what would happen next. Marcus's mind was racing as the bus made its way closer to the station. His hand gripped the edge of the seat, his knuckles turning white. The weight of the note in his pocket felt like it was pulling him down, the words echoing in his mind. "Don't trust anyone. They know who you are. What did that mean? Why had this woman chosen him to deliver this message? He was just a regular teenager, trying to get by in a world that never seemed to care much about people like him. He didn't know it yet, but his life was on the verge of unraveling in ways he couldn't imagine. As the bus slowed down, Marcus's heart began to race even faster. The station loomed ahead, but something felt wrong. The air seemed heavier, the lights of the city flickering in the distance like ominous warnings. He was supposed to meet his mom here. But was she really coming? Was there even time for her to get there? Something was telling him that by the time she arrived, things might already be out of control. He pulled the note out of his pocket again, feeling the crumpled paper in his fingers as he scanned the words once more. There had to be something he was missing, some clue hidden in plain sight. He looked around the bus station, searching for anyone who might look familiar. But all he saw were strangers, lost in their own worlds, just like him. He didn't feel safe here. It was as if the very walls of the station were closing in on him. Just as he was about to stand up, he heard a familiar voice calling his name. Marcus. His heart skipped a beat. It was his mom. Laura rushed through the door, her face pale, her eyes wide with worry. She had clearly been running. "Thank God I found you," she said, grabbing him by the shoulders. "What's going on? What's happened?" Marcus didn't know how to answer. He couldn't explain it to her, not yet. All he knew was that things were spiraling out of control. "Mom, we need to go. We're not safe here." Laura's brow furrowed, her worry deepening. "What do you mean?" "We're fine, we're just..." Before she could finish, a loud crash interrupted her. A loud, metallic bang from the back of the station made them both jump. Marcus's heart thudded in his chest, and he instinctively grabbed his mom's hand. The noise echoed through the empty building, the sound of something large and heavy being thrown against the wall. "Marcus, what the hell is going on?" Laura demanded, her voice shaking with fear. Before Marcus could answer, the room seemed to shift. Shadows seemed to stretch across the walls, dark and looming, and the temperature dropped suddenly, making him shiver. He looked around, but there was no one else in sight. The station was eerily quiet, except for the sound of his own breathing, quick and shallow. Then he saw it, a figure standing just at the edge of the platform, barely visible in the dim light. The figure was tall, cloaked in shadows, but the outline was unmistakable. It was a man, or at least, Marcus thought it was. His instincts screamed at him to run, but his body was frozen, locked in place. The figure didn't move, but Marcus could feel his gaze, the weight of it pressing down on him, as if the man knew something he didn't. Something about the man's presence made the hair on the back of Marcus's neck stand up. "Marcus," his mom whispered, looking over at the figure. Her voice was trembling, and Marcus could hear the uncertainty in her words. Who is that?" The figure stepped forward, his face still hidden in darkness. Marcus couldn't make out his features, but the man's voice was low, rough, as if he had been speaking in a whisper for too long. "You've been warned." Marcus's pulse surged, and he instinctively pulled his mom behind him, his mind racing for an escape plan, but there was nowhere to go. The doors were locked, the windows too high to climb through. He was trapped. The man stepped closer, his footfalls slow and deliberate. Each step felt like an eternity. "You can't outrun the truth," he said, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. Marcus felt his legs shake beneath him. This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't part of the plan. He had thought he was safe, but now it was clear that whatever had started in that motel room, whatever had been set in motion by the mysterious woman, was coming for him. Coming for them both. Suddenly, the sound of a phone ringing shattered the heavy silence. Marcus pulled his phone out of his pocket, his heart hammering in his chest. It was an unknown number. His hands were trembling as he answered it, his voice barely audible. "Hello." The voice on the other end was distorted, as if the call was coming through static. "Marcus, it's me. Teresa. You don't know me, but you have to listen. They're coming for you. It's not just you they're after. It's your mom too." Marcus's stomach dropped. How did this woman know who he was? How did she know where they were? He glanced over at his mom, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. He didn't know who to trust anymore, but Teresa's warning felt real. His gut twisted with the certainty that they weren't safe here, not anymore. He had to get out. But before he could say anything, the phone line went dead. Silence. The cold feeling of dread washed over him. Then, from the shadows, the figure spoke again. You can't hide. You never could. At that moment, Marcus's mind went blank, panic setting in. He grabbed his mom's arm and pulled her toward the door, but as he reached for the handle, the room seemed to grow colder, and the shadows in the corners of the station began to stretch toward them. They were surrounded. The tension in the air was unbearable, the weight of everything crashing down at once. They had no way out. No way to run. They were about to face whatever was coming, and they had no idea what to expect. All they could do was hold on, hoping they would survive the storm that was about to hit them. The tension was unbearable, and Marcus could feel the air in the room growing heavier, thicker, almost suffocating. His hands gripped the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. It was as if someone was holding them inside. The shadows at the edges of the room seemed to press closer, and Marcus could feel his pulse quicken with each passing second. He glanced back at his mom, whose face was pale with fear. Her eyes were wide, her breath shallow. She was just as trapped as he was, and the reality of their situation was beginning to sink in. Then, as if on cue, the sound of the doorbell echoed through the station. But it wasn't a normal ring, it was jagged, distorted, almost menacing. Marcus's heart skipped a beat, and he instinctively pulled his mom closer to him. There was something about that sound that felt wrong, out of place. It wasn't the ringing of a typical doorbell. This one felt like a signal, an alarm. He turned to look at the figure in the shadows, but the man was gone. He didn't know where he went, or if he had ever been there at all. His mind raced. Was he imagining things? Was this all a trick? Before he could answer himself, the phone in his hand buzzed again, startling him. The number was blocked, and the voice that came through the line was frantic, desperate. Marcus, listen to me. This is serious. There's something you don't understand. They're not just coming for you. It's all connected. The motel, the woman, everything. They've been watching you your whole life. You're not just any kid, Marcus. You're a target. And they're closing in. The voice paused, and Marcus could hear what sounded like distant footsteps in the background. I don't have much time. You need to trust me. Get out of there. Now. The line went dead again. Marcus's mind spun as the words hit him like a punch to the gut. He barely had time to process them before the door to the station's back hallway slammed open. The sound echoed through the building like a thunderclap, sending a chill down Marcus's spine. He couldn't explain it, but something told him that this was it, that the moment he had been dreading, the storm he had been warned about, was finally here. Marcus, his mom cried out, her voice shaking. She pulled at his arm, but he didn't move. His gaze was locked on the doorway where the sound had come from. There, standing in the doorway, was the woman. The same one who had given him the cryptic note. She was breathless, her face drawn with exhaustion and panic. Her clothes were disheveled, as if she had been running for hours. And her eyes, those wide, fearful eyes, looked directly at Marcus. Before either of them could speak, she rushed toward them, her movements desperate. You have to listen to me, she gasped, grabbing Marcus by the arm. They're here. They're right behind me. Marcus felt a jolt of adrenaline rush through his veins. Who's after you? He demanded, trying to keep his voice steady despite the overwhelming fear creeping into his chest. But the woman didn't answer. Instead, she turned toward the back of the station and hissed under her breath, We don't have time for this. You need to come with me. Now. Marcus's heart pounded, his instincts screaming at him to run, but he couldn't leave his mom behind. His eyes flicked to her, silently asking for her approval. She was frozen, her face pale, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. Mom, we have to go, Marcus said, his voice low, but filled with urgency. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, but he knew they couldn't stay in the station. Not with whatever or whoever was lurking in the shadows. Just as Marcus took a step forward, the woman grabbed his wrist tighter, her grip surprisingly strong. You don't understand, she whispered, her voice trembling with fear. They don't just want you, they want everything about you. And they'll stop at nothing to get it. Suddenly, a series of loud, rapid knocks echoed from the front door. It was a harsh, frantic sound that made Marcus's stomach churn. He felt a chill run down his spine. Whoever was on the other side wasn't here to help. They were here for them. Before anyone could react, the door to the station burst open with a force that rattled the entire building. Two men, dressed in dark suits and sunglasses, stepped inside. They moved with military precision, their faces grim, unreadable. Marcus's breath caught in his throat. These weren't just ordinary men. They were something else, something cold, calculated. And they were looking directly at him. The woman let out a small, terrified cry. "No. Stay away from him," she shouted, pushing Marcus behind her. One of the men spoke in a low, cold voice, his gaze never leaving Marcus. "You've been marked," he said simply, his words cutting through the silence like a knife. "We've been watching you for a long time, Marcus. And now it's time to collect." Marcus's heart raced, the panic rising in his chest. "What are you talking about? Who are you?" he demanded, his voice barely more than a whisper. The second man stepped forward, his hand reaching inside his jacket. "It's too late for questions," he said, pulling out a small device that looked like a sleek, black phone. "The truth you've been running from? It's all about to be exposed. And there's nothing you can do to stop it." Marcus could feel his legs shaking. His mind screamed for him to run, to escape, but his feet were glued to the floor. His mom was still behind him, too scared to move. Before he could process the words, the first man spoke again, his voice colder this time. "It's done. The truth is coming, whether you're ready or not." The woman turned to Marcus with wide, terrified eyes. "Run," she whispered. "Run now, before they—" But her words were cut off as the lights in the station flickered violently, casting eerie shadows across the room. The whole building seemed to tremble. The air grew even colder. Then, the unmistakable sound of a door slamming shut echoed through the space. Marcus's mind raced, and the confusion hit him like a tidal wave. Who were these people? What truth were they talking about? He didn't have the answers, but one thing was clear: they were about to be pulled deeper into something far more dangerous than he could ever have imagined. And with that, the stakes were raised higher than ever before. The tension in the room was unbearable, the cold air pressing in on them from all sides. Marcus's heart pounded in his chest, and he could barely breathe as the two men in suits stepped closer. His mind raced, trying to process everything that was happening. These men weren't just ordinary people, they were part of something much bigger. Something dangerous. And they had come for him. The woman, still standing in front of Marcus, reached into her pocket and pulled out something small and metallic. She didn't say a word, but the look in her eyes told him everything. It was time. Time to make a choice. "Stay back," she warned, her voice firm despite the fear in her eyes. "You don't know what you're dealing with." The first man sneered, unfazed by her warning. "You can't protect him," he said coldly. "It's over. His hour's now." Marcus felt his knees weaken. He didn't know what to do. His mom was still behind him, helpless, her hand gripping his shoulder. He turned to her, but her face was pale, her eyes filled with confusion and terror. This wasn't the life she had signed up for. This wasn't what she wanted for him. Then the woman's voice broke through his thoughts. "You have to trust me, Marcus," she said, her words filled with urgency. "We don't have much time." Suddenly, the room seemed to blur. Marcus felt the air around him grow thick, almost suffocating, and before he knew it, the woman had grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the back exit of the station. The men in suits moved swiftly, but they were too late. The woman slammed the door behind them, locking it just as the two men reached the door. There was a loud bang against the wood, but it held firm. They were safe, for now. They stumbled out into the alley behind the station, the cold night air rushing in like a breath of fresh air. Marcus felt dizzy, his mind reeling from the shock of everything that had just happened. What was happening? Who were these people? What did they want from him? The woman turned to face him, her expression grave. "You've been running your whole life, Marcus. You didn't know it, but you've always been a part of something much bigger than you ever imagined." She paused, her eyes flickering with something he couldn't quite place. "The truth is, Marcus, you weren't supposed to survive. You were never meant to live this long. But here you are. He felt a knot tighten in his stomach. What do you mean? What are you talking about? The woman let out a deep breath, her shoulders sagging. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you sooner. But you're not just any kid, Marcus. You're. Before she could finish, the sound of footsteps echoed down the alley. Marcus spun around, panic rising in his chest. But when he saw who it was, his breath caught in his throat. It was his mom. Mom, he cried, running to her. But something was different. Her eyes were blank, devoid of any recognition. Mom, what's wrong? What's happening? Marcus demanded, shaking her by the shoulders. But she didn't respond. She didn't even blink. Her body moved stiffly, mechanically, like a puppet with no strings. And then, in a voice that was not her own, she spoke. Marcus, it's time. His blood ran cold. The voice wasn't his mother's. It was something darker. A cold, emotionless voice that sent shivers down his spine. Mom, what's going on? Please, talk to me, Marcus begged, his voice cracking. But the figure that looked like his mother took a step back, her movements jerky and unnatural. You've been part of the plan for years, Marcus. You've been living a lie. The voice seemed to laugh, a hollow, mechanical sound that made Marcus's stomach turn. The woman in front of him stepped forward, her face pale with disbelief. No. This can't be. They've already taken her. Marcus's heart skipped a beat as realization set in. This wasn't just a random set of events, it was all connected. His mom had been part of this too. She wasn't the person he thought she was. Before he could process it further, the figure, his mother, lunged forward, grabbing him by the arm with terrifying strength. Marcus struggled, but it felt like his mother's grip was unbreakable, as if she wasn't human anymore. The woman who had been helping him reached for her pocket again and pulled out the metallic object. It glinted in the dim light, and she held it up, pointing it at the figure that had once been his mom. Stop. You can't have him, the woman shouted, her voice trembling with fear. There was a brief moment of silence, and then everything happened at once. The woman pressed the object, and a bright light erupted from it, enveloping the figure in front of them. Marcus felt a strange sensation, like his body was being pulled in two directions at once, his head spinning as the light grew brighter and brighter. The figure, his mother, screamed, a sound that sent chills down Marcus's spine. And then, in an instant, she disappeared. Just gone. Like she had never been there at all. Marcus stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest, his breath coming in ragged gasps. What had just happened? Who was that? What was going on? The woman, still holding the strange device, lowered it slowly, her hands trembling. I'm so sorry, she whispered. You didn't deserve this. But you need to understand, Marcus. They've been watching you for years. Your mother, she wasn't your mother. Not really. She was something else. A part of their plan. Marcus could barely hear her over the pounding in his ears. His world was spinning out of control. Everything he thought he knew about his life, about his mom, had been shattered in an instant. But before he could ask another question, the woman stepped back, her eyes filled with regret. I have to go, she said softly. But remember, Marcus, you are the key. You always have been. They'll come after you again. You can't run forever. With that, she turned and disappeared into the night, leaving Marcus alone in the alley. His thoughts were a blur, his mind struggling to piece together the fragments of the truth. But one thing was clear now, the life he had known was gone. And whatever had just happened, whatever was coming for him, was far from over. And the biggest twist. It wasn't just his mom who had been hiding secrets. He was part of a bigger game, a game that was only just beginning. Marcus stood there in the alley, the weight of what had just transpired crashing down on him. His chest felt heavy, and his head spun with confusion. The woman who had tried to help him was gone, leaving nothing behind but a sense of dread and a million unanswered questions. His mother, who he had trusted, loved, and depended on, wasn't his mother at all. He had been living a lie his entire life, and now, he didn't know what to believe anymore. The cold night air bit at his skin, but it barely registered. His mind was too consumed with what had just happened. He thought of the men in suits, the strange device, and the terrifying figure that had pretended to be his mother. Nothing made sense. What was this plan they kept talking about? And why had they been after him all this time? He glanced around the alley, half expecting someone to be watching him, lurking in the shadows, waiting to finish what they had started. But the street was eerily silent. No one else was around. He was alone. And for the first time, Marcus felt like he truly was. As he stood there, lost in his thoughts, the woman's words echoed in his mind. "You are the key. You always have been." What did that mean? How was he the key to any of this? He didn't have answers, only more questions. But for the first time in a long while, he felt something shift inside him. Maybe it was the knowledge that he wasn't just some helpless bystander in a dangerous game. Maybe it was the realization that he had the power to change things, to fight back. Marcus knew one thing for certain: he couldn't stay here, hiding. He couldn't pretend that this was all some bad dream. His life, as he knew it, was over. And now, he had a choice to make. He could run, continue to live in fear, always looking over his shoulder. Or he could face whatever was coming head-on. He wasn't sure he had the strength to do that yet, but the idea of running, of being weak, didn't sit right with him anymore. He turned away from the alley and started walking down the street, his footsteps echoing in the silence. His phone buzzed in his pocket, pulling him from his thoughts. He pulled it out, almost not wanting to look. But when he saw the number on the screen, his heart skipped a beat. It was a new message, one that hadn't come through before. It was from the blocked number he had been getting calls from earlier. His hands shook as he opened the message. "They'll be back. You need to prepare. The truth is out there, Marcus. And it's not what you think. Trust no one." The words sent a cold chill down his spine, but they also gave him something else. A sense of urgency. Whoever had sent this message was still out there, and they were warning him. The truth was closer than he realized, and he had to find it. He wasn't sure who to trust anymore, but he knew he couldn't do it alone. He needed answers. Marcus pocketed the phone and kept walking, his mind racing. His mom, if that thing even was his mother, was gone, and with her, any sense of normalcy. But there was still a part of him that wanted to believe in the good things in life. He wanted to believe in the love he had shared with his mom, even if it was all a lie. And maybe, just maybe, he could find that love again. Maybe he could uncover the truth about who he was and why they had been targeting him for so long. But the road ahead wouldn't be easy. He knew that. The danger wasn't over, not by a long shot. The men in suits would be back. Whoever had been pulling the strings would be back. And they wouldn't stop until they got what they wanted. But Marcus was different now. He wasn't the scared kid he used to be. He had learned too much. He had been forced to grow up faster than anyone should, but now, it was time to use that knowledge to fight back. As he walked, the darkened streets around him seemed to grow quieter. It was as if the world itself had gone still, waiting for something. He didn't know what that something was, but he was determined to find out. The story wasn't over. Not yet. He finally reached a small park at the edge of town, a quiet place that used to be a sanctuary for him when things felt overwhelming. The moonlight reflected off the calm surface of the pond, and for a moment, it felt like the world had stopped moving. It was peaceful here, but Marcus knew that peace was fleeting. The quiet was only a temporary respite from the chaos that lay ahead. He sat down on the bench and let out a deep breath, trying to steady his racing thoughts. The woman's warning echoed in his mind again. Trust no one. For the first time, Marcus realized what that meant. It meant that even the people he had trusted most could be part of this game. His mother, the woman who had raised him, had been someone or something else entirely. She had been a tool in a larger scheme, and now Marcus had become a pawn in that same game. He was no longer just running from the truth. He was now seeking it out, determined to uncover the secrets that had been hidden from him his entire life. He would find out who he really was, what his role in this dark web was, and why they had been watching him all along. But as he sat there, looking up at the stars, a strange sense of calm washed over him. He didn't have all the answers yet, but he knew one thing: he wasn't going to let fear control him anymore. Whatever came next, he would face it head-on. The truth was out there, and he would find it no matter what. And just as he stood up to leave the park, a familiar voice called out to him from the shadows. His heart stopped for a moment as he turned toward the figure that had just stepped into the moonlight. It was the woman. She hadn't left after all. She had been watching him, waiting for the right moment to approach. Marcus's pulse quickened as she walked toward him, her face as serious as ever. "Are you ready?" she asked quietly, her eyes locked onto his. "Because things are about to get much more dangerous." Marcus took a deep breath, his mind made up. "I'm ready." And with that, they both turned and walked into the unknown, ready to face whatever came next in the quest for the truth. The story wasn't over. It had only just begun.